Okay, we're continuing our study on atheism. In a particular way, we're digging into the issue of atheism, not so much by studying atheism itself, but by studying the common attacks that atheists will bring to Christianity. And we call these slogans that leave Christians speechless. We've tried to pick out those ones that are very popular out there today, especially going around on the internet. Kind of quick soundbite type things that people will bring forward and really have their faith disturbed by these things, or from the atheist perspective, the unbeliever's perspective, who really do believe that these slogans are legitimate for the most part, for them to have some type of quick and easy defense by attacking Christianity. And so we've talked about already the first one, which was a rather complicated slogan that said, you ask why I'm an atheist, just ask yourself why you don't believe in all the other gods in the world, and you'll see that you're an atheist too, just I worship one less God than you do. So we dealt with that in a worldview way. Last week we talked about God in the Old Testament as being accused of being a moral monster. Today, it's an interesting one because I think that this is probably the most powerful and the most widely used slogan that is out there that is being used today by atheists. Now, an interesting division that you have to realize about atheism is that you've got two types of atheism, especially since the internet. You've got atheism that is kind of the academic side of atheism, that is interacting and writing papers and interacting with Christians, and I feel like doing at least an honest job of trying to deal with the data and the evidence. Then you've got internet atheism. And internet atheism is a whole new animal. It is a type of propaganda atheism. It's a type of atheism that seeks to put together nice graphs or short sound bites or quick web pages, or as we'll see today, quick videos that really have an emotional impact to drain Christians of their confidence. But for the most part, and especially as we'll see today, lack any type of substance, lack any type of engagement, any type of true evidence. But today we're going to be talking about the charge that is put out there that Christianity borrowed from ancient mystery religions, Egyptian, Greek, Roman religions that have gone on in the past before Christianity, and Christianity got all of its doctrine, all of its beliefs as they pulled from these ancient religions. Anybody ever heard this one? Christianity borrowed from ancient mystery religions? A few of you.
What's funny about this too, or what's interesting, is you hear it, and most people hear it and they don't know what to do with it. And it's kind of this, it is this internet atheist, and this internet atheist, we're not inventing this. Even scholars are speaking of, that you have your scholarly atheists and you have your internet atheists. And then on the internet atheist side is that so many of these things, they're hard to verify, and that's, unless if you kind of know where to look, know what sources to trust as well. And the problem is it's like you're a swimming pool that's just like, just this thing full of water, and then all of a sudden when you're online you just get all these little pinpricks, and you hear all these slogans, you watch these YouTube videos, and all of a sudden you might feel like you're just leaking out, all your faith is gone. And a lot of this is based on kind of what we were joking about. If you say it strong enough, and you really put enough confidence and gusto behind it, it seems like you're true, like what you're saying is totally true, without really being able to evaluate it.
Yeah, and a lot of it is emotional steamrolling. It's not, hey, let's deal with this and let's wrestle with this issue. Let's steamroll a whole hodgepodge of things together and then really drain you of your faith.
And I notice my kids do this once in a while too, where once in a while they'll tell a lie, and I'll know for sure they're telling a lie. It's so obvious. And then other times they are so convinced emotionally that they're telling the truth that I start wondering, like, maybe this isn't a lie, even though everything within me thinks like, no, my kids are telling a lie, I know they're telling a lie, but they're saying, no, Dad, I'm really telling you the truth, I really believe this. I'm like, man, maybe this is really true, even though the evidence points the other way. And that's emotionally steamrolling.
Mystery religions. Here's the contention. Christianity is nothing unique. It is a religion that has borrowed its beliefs from the ancient Greco-Roman and oftentimes even Egyptian and even modern day, which you'll find some parallel stuff we'll talk about later, mystery religions. Here is from the book The Jesus Mysteries, by no means a scholarly type work, one of those popular things that the Da Vinci Code movie gets its information from. But it says, why should we consider the stories of Osiris, Dionysus, Adonis, Attis, Mithras, and other pagan mystery saviors as fables, yet come across essentially the same story told in a Jewish context and believe it to be the biography of a carpenter from Bethlehem?
Now imagine you're in a college classroom and you've just heard the teacher say that. Or you're at a party or you're with family at a family reunion and your uncle that's an atheist just says something along those lines. I mean, you're dead in your tracks.
Yeah.
You've got nowhere to go.
Well, somebody comes up to you and says, you ever heard of Mithras? I think so. Did you know it was also before Jesus a dying and rising God? Well, no, I didn't know that, but I still believe mine's true and that's false. Well, why would you? What about Osiris? Do you believe, have you ever heard of him? No. Why not consider these other gods as well? Besides just all this, because you've grown up in a Christian context, accepting Christianity as being true. And it really leaves you speechless if you haven't wrestled with these things or been through this class. Tom Harper in The Pagan Christ says, there's nothing about Jesus of the Gospels either said, that the Jesus of the Gospels either said or did that cannot be shown to have originated thousands of years before in Egyptian mystery rites and other sacred liturgies. Again, same type of thing. Let me go here quickly to this video, and for those of you who are watching this online, I think it will come through. I'll just try to stay close. We don't have the system that will do what we need it to. This is from the somewhat popular, I don't think that Fleming it took off as well as Fleming wanted it to, but it's a popular atheist. I would say with confidence that this is atheist propaganda because it's not dealing with any of the issues. Yeah, thank you. It's called The God Who Wasn't There, a film beyond belief. Great, stunning visuals, great music. I don't know where they got the score for this, but I like to watch it just for the music and the transitions and everything like that. But certainly not for the data. But you watch this, and I know people who have watched this that have said, my faith is just shrinking as I go through this, and I can't watch it anymore. And we're going to watch a little segment of it right now. That's too loud.
There are other similar savior figures in the same neighborhood at the same time in history. Mithras, Attis, Adonis, Osiris, Tammuz, and so forth. And nobody thinks that these characters are anything but mythical, and their stories are so similar, most of them in fact having some kind of resurrection or another, sometimes even with celebrations after 3 days and so forth, that it just seems like special pleading to say, oh, well, in this one case, it really happened. church fathers understood this was a problem because they were already getting the same objections from pagans. They said, what you say about Jesus, we've been saying about the Dionysus and Hercules all the time. What's the big deal? And they didn't believe in them either anymore. And so the Christian apologists, the defenders of the faith, would say, well, yeah, but this one is true. And you see, Satan counterfeited it in advance because he knew this day would come. Well, I tell you, that tells you two things right there, that even they didn't deny that these other Jesus-like characters were before Jesus, or they never would have resorted to something like that. Satan knew it would happen and counterfeited it in advance.
In case you're wondering, yes, this remains the explanation to this day. Fortunately for Christian leaders, they almost never have to offer it.
I'm wondering if either one of you are familiar with Osiris or Mithras or Dionysus?
Hardly at all.
I'm wondering if you've heard of Osiris or Mithra or Dionysus.
I've heard of Dionysus. The other two, I don't think I've heard of.
And do you know anything about Dionysus?
No, it sounds like an interesting Greek name, but no. Was he a contemporary of Jesus or the early church?
I'm wondering if you've heard any of those theories, or...
Well, you know, it's probably good that I haven't. I've never heard of any of those gods.
Okay, but if you were...
I've never heard of any of those pagan gods, no.
No, I haven't heard about it. Are you familiar with Osiris or Mithra or Dionysus?
I've heard about them, but I really haven't really got into it, making research on what it was about. I really haven't. So, but I've heard about it. It's been on the news a couple times, but I've never really paid attention to it. No.
Is there anything that you know or that you've gathered from those?
No, I really haven't paid attention to it. It's all about Jesus, man. That's all you got to pay attention to, you know?
It's weird watching videos like that because we always watch the man on the street where it's the Christian talking to non-Christians, but to see man on the street where Christians are made to look like fools is kind of tough to see.
Yeah, and it's funny because they interview Robert Price, which is a scholar in the atheist world, but whenever it comes to the Christian side, they interview people off the street. It's not kind of an equal footing that we have there. There's not one stable Christian or Christian scholar that is interviewed there, and so they just take these street interviews and make an emotional appeal. And as you can tell, this type of stuff can really disturb your faith if we don't know how to respond to it. And so that is the contention, is that Christianity borrowed from mystery religions. If you accept Christianity, you should at least give equal credence to Mithras and Osiris and Hercules and everyone else, and you don't really know how to respond sometimes. So let's talk about a mystery religion. What is a mystery religion?
For people who might have been on the periphery, do you mind doing that one slide that you skipped about Mithras, just so?
Well,
just
I've got that later on.
Oh, you do have it again?
Yeah, I think
okay.
I accidentally put it too early.
I saw it in there. Okay.
Let's talk about what is a mystery religion. First of all, understand this in the context of ancient polytheism. As we've talked about polytheism, we talked about that actually the first session on this series. And when we talk about polytheism, what is that? The belief that there are what? Many gods. Okay, so we're dealing with a context that is generally polytheistic, Egypt and Greece and Rome. Now, you got to understand about polytheism is that polytheism is an interesting animal because it was more cultural than anything else. It wasn't as if people believed in polytheistic worldview the way you do about Jesus. It was much different, much more a society type thing. We find this becoming most evidenced, especially at the birth of Christianity, whenever people wanted Christians to die. It wasn't the government that wanted them to die. It wasn't the emperors at first that wanted Christians to die. It was the grassroots people. They hated Christians. Why did they hate Christians? Not so much because Christians brought a new option to the table, but their option meant that they had to stop their festivals and their Greek gods that were dedicated to their cities, to where people would come and bring all kinds of commerce to their cities, and it was great partying and great fun, and you had the Olympics and everything else that were dedicated to the gods. And so it was a religion that was more cultural than anything else, but offered very little true feelings of relationship or salvation or a future hope. Whenever you believed in this pantheon of God that was up in the sky, that was kind of fighting with each other and jealous and lustful, it was just a kind of a weird thing that even the ancient Greek philosophers would talk about how it wasn't really a belief system so much as a cultural lifestyle. And so the mystery religions come in on this context, and they come in around the time of Christianity, maybe a few hundred years before you have the birth of the mystery religions. But what they really were, the reason why they were mystery was first because it was kind of a group that you had to be initiated into as a secret group. And so whenever you would come into one of these groups, normally you were sworn to some type of secrecy. And so that's why it's really hard for us to pinpoint a lot of the beliefs of these mystery religions, because they weren't written about. It was more of a secret thing. But it was also for the people this idea of becoming closer to your God and finding a sense of salvation. There was ultimate hope in these mystery religions, and it kind of evidenced people's need and desire to overcome something that is lacking within them, and a need to find hope beyond, especially this pantheon of gods that offered no hope. And so the mystery religion is kind of this agglomeration, this bringing together the pantheon of gods along with a satisfaction of hope. Somehow these gods become our Savior. And there are certain rites and things that we find within this mystery religion that are characteristic of all the mystery religions, such as initiation through baptism. It was something to where you had washings, ceremonial cleansings before you came into this religion. Jewish people did this as well. It was nothing unique at all. And so you had this initiation rite, you had these normal meetings, you had some way in which you were going to gain salvation, and there was hope. It was kind of, those are the ties that brought all these mystery religions together. Other than that, they were kind of a secrecy. There was secrecy behind them. So, mystery religion provided a more intimate pursuit of salvation and devotion than the typical polytheistic worldview provided. Let's go through a few of the responses whenever you're talking about mystery religions, and then I'll get into some specifics, especially with Mithras. But it's very hard. This is probably, I told Tim earlier, I said this is the hardest one to teach because it's the easiest one to counter. In each one of these, I can identify with the objection. I can go there and go there with the God of the Old Testament. I can go there with some of the objections of the first one, but I can't go there with this one, because whenever you start looking at the data, whenever you start looking at these mystery religions, you just don't find any comparison. That big list that he showed up there on this video, Fleming showed up there on this video, which is reproduced on sites all over the place, this exact list is I mean, the best I can say is half of it has to just be made up because we can't find where in the world they came up with it. And the other half is just like, are you serious? Did you really just make the same comparison that I think you're making here? Because it really isn't a comparison. There's very little that I could find that I could identify with. I'm going to bring up one at the very end that I say, okay, maybe this is the best we've got. But even then, it doesn't really help too much. But most of the claims that when we talk about the foundational beliefs like the dying and rising of gods are later than Christianity. A Swedish scholar, Medinger, professor of Lund University and member of the Royal Academy of Letters, History, and Antiquities of Stockholm, in his book, The Riddle of Resurrection, says that the consensus of modern scholars, and he says this is nearly universal consensus, and this is all I find across the board whenever you're looking at the scholarly stuff in this area. Say it is a consensus among scholars, atheists, and believing scholars that this whole internet resurgence of what they sometimes label parallelomania, finding parallels between Christianity and the other religions, is just rejected outright. Nobody takes it seriously because since about 1930, it got really a lot of traction in about 1850 and then lasted until about 1930, and then it just died out. And just virtually every scholar that there is says there is no comparison. You cannot make the types of leaps that people are trying to make with each one of these.
Which that's pretty stunning, like to think that of all of the atheist scholars in the world, that none of them have said, yes, these pagan things were way before Jesus. I mean, in that video, they were saying some of them from Egypt were thousands of years before Jesus.
And you know what those are? Those are mummies. That's the
Yeah,
best
well-
we can do. Those try to find mummies and try to find this underworld that they went to. Has nothing to do with resurrection. It's just a belief in an afterlife and a preservation of the body, but has no parallel to Jesus.
And the fact that atheist scholars would say that, would say these people who are making these claims, they're crazy. Any of those claims, if there are any parallels, they were borrowed from Christianity after Jesus. So, yeah, there's a question back here.
No, here's what happened was Justin Martyr he was an apologist of the early church. That was around 110, 120. Him along with Origen, who came along around 200, 250. They both fought for the truthfulness of Christianity to a polytheistic Rome and to a Rome and a Greek world that accepted these mystery religions that had all kinds of stuff in them. And he said, in these beliefs, you believe such things like Hercules, and nothing that necessarily parallels, but has extraordinary nature to it, extraordinary miraculous nature to it. And he says, if you can believe this about the other gods, why is it so hard to believe about Christianity? And so that's how the parallel and the argument goes from Justin Martyr's standpoint. Now, whenever he talks about Satan conceiving and making something beforehand that would prophetically occur later on, that's completely taken out of context. You've got to read the context and understand the argument that he is making. And it's only one to try to draw these people in to just consider the truthfulness of Christianity, since they themselves are rejecting it wholesale.
It'd be like me going to like a Trekkie convention, and all Trekkies are atheists. And I say, look, you guys are Trekkies. I mean, you all hold to this supernatural, crazy thing. Is it that hard to believe that Jesus might be real? And then you, using my words against me, say, look, he's proving that Trekkie thought is correct. Instead he's just trying to
borrowed from Star Trek.
and borrowed from all of that stuff. I'd be like, no, I was just using their context to show how they should be able to believe in Jesus from what they already believe already.
And he claims all of these post-date first century. So the majority claim is, even when they look to parallel Christianity, they're way after Christianity. Most of them coming in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th centuries and finding their development within Christianity and borrowing from Christianity. So far from Christianity borrowing from these, they borrow from Christianity because of the popularity of Christianity. Then you do have some aspects, just in a couple of cases, of a resurrected figure, but it's not until the 3rd, 4th century. Now, whenever you're talking about these claims, most of them don't parallel Christianity. Places and occurrences are unspecified. It's not like in this year, under this emperor, in this town, this person was born to this person, and here's all the people that saw it. It's just part of the polytheistic mystical mindset that doesn't give any historical context. And so it's not trying to verify itself historically. It's not saying, come and check, come and see, look at the evidence, like Christianity is. Christianity is placed in a whole different context where it gives you every single historical marker to falsify it. These are unfalsifiable claims. I can't prove anything about Hercules one way or the other because there's not any substantial data to be able to make a case for or against it, and therefore it just is out there. Christianity is completely different. Death and resurrection usually have nothing to do with actual people resurrection, but an explanation to the seasons of life. Mom, why does it stop raining during this season? And they would come up with these elaborate explanations about how one god would get in a fight with another god, and it was a thunder god. Baal would get in a fight with his brother of the underworld, and his brother would taunt him and say, "Come down here, and I'll show you who's tough." and Baal would finally come, all right, I'm coming. The God of thunder is bringing the rain. And so he comes down there to the underworld, and his brother traps him, and then for a whole season cycle, there is no rain. And then what happens? Well, the mother comes and forces her son to release the other son, and so by the time the cycle comes back around, Baal is back, and he's bringing thunder, and he's bringing rain. So that happens all the time. So it's just an explanation for the seasonal cycles usually, and that's about how it goes.
But what can happen is someone could say, look, he was released just like how Jesus was released from the tomb, and he went back up just like Jesus went back up. Look, Christianity's copying all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, where did you get this?
Yeah.
Where did this come from?
Well, at that point, I don't think anybody's being intellectually honest. I don't think they're really trying to wrestle with the data. I think they're trying to find excuses to go against Christianity. I warn people about that because it doesn't have any intellectual vigor. It has no substantial integrity to it at all, and it is completely manipulative of your own self and to the person you're trying to bring to your side on this. We've really got to deal with the issue, and if you're really saying that there is a parallel between Baal getting trapped in the underworld by his brother and then getting released at the seasonal cycles with Jesus Christ, you haven't really dealt with Jesus Christ. You haven't really looked at what is being claimed there. No evidence for death of these gods as vicarious for the people. We have nothing for that these gods are dying for the people. Like I said, that list that guy put together, it's so hard to figure out where he got that. A lot of people have challenged him and said, hey, can you provide some evidence? Can you come and debate? And he just rejects it. And then whenever he ends up giving the evidence, it's so far off and so distant and so different. The three wise men, nobody knows where he got that. But some of the star gods, had different constellations, but it's not even a parallel to the wise men seeing a star that comes over the city of Bethlehem and leads them to Christ. It's not a parallel at all. It's a strain. And just a minute ago, Robert Price said, for some reason, Christians think that they can have some type of intellectual special pleading that theirs is true and everybody else's is false. And here's my deal is, why do you think you get an intellectual special pleading to put forth these parallels without any evidence? And you look at the evidence for whatever it is you're claiming, you know that it doesn't parallel. So in order to put together these lists and just say, you need to believe this and you need to be disturbed in your faith, that's intellectual special pleading. It's saying, please, please, just believe me. No, don't look at the data. No, don't look up Mithras or Isis or Hercules. Just believe me. Emotionally grab a hold of what I'm saying and let me tear you down. That's intellectual special pleading. It's really emotional special pleading. Parallels for the resurrection. The riddle of the resurrection, it says, there is, as far as I am aware, no prima facie evidence, meaning beforehand, that the death and resurrection of Jesus is a mythological construct drawing on myths and rites of the dying and rising gods of the surrounding world. And that guy's not a believer saying this. I mean, I could quote you unbelieving source after unbelieving source after unbelieving source that says this died a long time ago. Internet atheists have brought it back, and they're just hoping that it catches on. And indeed it has. Slogans. I've already told you about the story of Baal and his brother Mott, but let's see here. Most of these, as you can see, Attis' resurrection appears 200 years after Christ.
So when they mention Attis in that video of evidence of like, look, Christianity took this from Attis, and you say, well, wait a second, Attis came 100 years after Christ. Where'd you get that? How can you possibly put that in the video that Attis was stolen from Jesus followers to say, hey, that's a good idea, let's put it in our religion.
Some of these stories you could say, well, the story that I have comes 100 years after Christ, but I bet it predates Christ. I'm saying, okay, that's an argument from silence, but do you have anything better? Because all I've got is the data. And so if it shows that it comes 100 years after Christ, that's the best I can do.
And Attis is not fully the Christian story as well.
Yeah. And again, doesn't even really parallel. It's again, you see the dying and rising gods having to do with the seasonal cycles. Adonis appears 100 years. Attis is 200 years. Adonis 100 years. Osiris, whose body, this is an interesting one. People always mention Osiris. But Osiris is this guy that was cut up into 17 or 14 pieces, and he's put back together by Isis, his sister. So she feels sorry for him. His body's been distributed all over the world, these 14 pieces. She finds 13 of them. I don't know why not all 14, but she finds 13 of them, puts them back together, and makes him the god of the underworld. And so that's the resurrection we're talking about. You tell me if that parallels. I mean, it's not much of a resurrection, first of all. There's not a humanity there. There's not an incarnation there. There's not even a living in this world there afterwards. It's living as the ruler of the underworld. And sometimes it's this place that is between, if you think of it, between hell and between where we live, kind of this ethereal type of existence. He's the ruler of that world. No parallel. But if people say, have you ever heard of Osiris? Did you know that Osiris predated Christ and died and rose from the grave? Mithraism as a Western religion did not develop until the mid-2nd century. I'm going to deal with that quite a bit in just a moment. And all mystery religions were generally non-related in beliefs and were dynamic in development. In other words, people used to believe that all these mystery religions kind of came from this common seed, that they were all birthed out of the same thing, and they all had the same essential beliefs. But what we've discovered is that they're all very distinct, and they are all non-stable. It's not as if here's the beliefs and that's where we find it, but we find it developing. And in another 100 years, we'll have more stories that are a little bit different. And then another 100 years, and especially after Christ, people like the Jesus story and was in competition with Christianity. So that's whenever you have all these elements that parallel with Christianity. Now, I would admit that there are some sacramental elements, such as possibly the way me and Tim talk about this a lot, how the hand of the blessing is. It's a little bit different than the hand of the Trinity, but if you ever see anybody doing like this and you do the blessing, that seems to have its origins in mystery religions. I'm not really sure, but it could. But if you're talking about liturgical, sacramental type things that the church practices, what hats they wear, that kind of stuff, and you say that Christianity borrowed from them, I say, so what? None of our essential beliefs borrowed from them. Okay, this one's hard to see, but Mithraism. Okay, Mithras was born of a virgin. Did you know that's true? Mithras was born of a virgin. I don't know how else to put it. I mean, he was born of a rock. Okay, so I imagine the rock was a virgin, if you want to put it that way. But if that's the stretch and the parallel you're making and manipulating that way, you either really haven't seen it, and I hope to be enlightening you right now, or you really are being deceptive, and you got to deal with that problem.
But this is the nature of this question and of this topic. It's like, okay, an atheist is saving this. Like, yeah, we've had this talk, but Mithraism, like, that's going to be the nuclear bomb that's just going to blow all this out of the water. And I'm going to lead with my strongest thing, was that born of a virgin. Boom, Yeah. And then you're like, okay, yeah, born of a rock. Okay, I guess that's a virgin, or, but that's the best that they got leading this. I mean, that's their head, they're leading with this. So this is born of a virgin, and they put in the video, born of a virgin. You think to yourself, oh my gosh, we have copied everything. And then you realize that a rock is Mithras's mom. It's bizarre, and to equate that to Mary is just ridiculous of how you can make such a strong connection.
Mithras was born in a cave. Born in a rock, out of a rock, maybe in a cave. And I say, okay, so what? Christ, we don't really have anything till the 2nd century that ever states that Christ was born in a cave, so we don't really have a Savior that was born in a cave, so it doesn't even parallel. Well, Mithras was born on December 25th. Yeah, so was the sun god, and Christ wasn't. That was adopted in about the last year of Constantine's reign, and that was a policy within Christianity that Christianity had adopted that said, instead of defeating the other religions by interacting with them, let's just assume all of their content. And so let's place the birth of Christ on December 25th. Most people had already had it. January 6th, Nobody even believed that. That was actually the actual birth date, but, it was the best we got. So, again, I say, so what? Christ wasn't born on December 25th. Mithridates had 12 followers. And as far as I can tell, I think that may be true, but again, I say, so what? If that's, whenever all boils down with Mithridates, you say, Christianity borrowed from Mithridates because Mithridates had 12 followers. I say, no, that's a leap, that really doesn't do much.
And you have to realize these are myths. These are mystery religions, which means they aren't rooted in any historical details. And so you can't say, okay, what were their names? What was their mom? Where were they born? Were there people that corroborated the story? All the things that we talk about, the historicity of the Bible, and being able to actually track down like a reporter and be able to figure out that these are historically, generally should be believed. This is just being thrown out 12, all these details.
Mithridates promised eternal life. Again, it's kind of so what? I can name you 100 different religions that say believing in them will grant you eternal life. That has no relevance to our discussion because normally religions are trying to produce some type of hope for the afterlife. Mithridates sacrificed himself for mankind. No, he didn't. He sacrificed a bull for mankind, and that's not any type of parallel. The baptism in Mithraism was you would stand under a bull, they would cut the bull open, and the blood would wash you. They'd say that's a parallel to baptism. I say, no, it's not. You're making leaps. You're seeking, and you're asking for special pleading to find some type of parallel. Mithridates died and rose 3 days later. We don't even have any record of Mithridates dying anywhere. So you kind of have to die in record in order to be raised. I mean, nobody thinks he's gone on living, but it just never tells us of his death. So no record of his death. Don't know where anybody gets that from. Mithridates was the Logos, the way, the truth, and life. No, Mithridates wasn't the Logos, the way, the truth, and life until 100 years after Jesus, where they adopted Christian slogans in order to compete better with Christianity, especially with the way, the truth, and the life. Logos was a term that was very common in the day. Mithraism had a sacramental meal. So you're telling me that if you have a religion and they get together and eat in celebration, that somehow Christianity borrowed from that and it illegitimizes Christianity? I mean, what group of people doesn't get back together to eat, to celebrate their faith?
Well, and we would never look at Islam and look at Ramadan and say, look, they're fasting and they're eating. Christians and Islam came hundreds of years after Christianity, and so because they fast and because they eat, they obviously stole everything from Christianity, and that's totally false. I mean, you would never use that logic. It's just nonsensical to use that logic to argue against Islam. Because, everybody eats, and fasting is also a general thing that people do as well. You see that even when Elijah on Mount Carmel is going against the prophets of Baal, they're fasting as well. And so you can't, saying that fasting and whoever did it first means that it's true and everything else copied is just, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Mithraism as a Western religion did not develop until the mid-2nd century. We have no record of it before that as a Western religion. All mystery religions were generally non-related in beliefs and dynamic in development. There is L. Patterson in Mithraism and Christianity, one of the authoritative sources on Mithraism, says there is no direct connection between the two religions, either in origin or development. Now, here are the basic responses that I ask you guys to give to people who counter this, because we can't go through every single alleged parallel and show you how they're different. It's a lot of fun to do that, but at the same time, there's just so many of them out there. There's so many mystery religions. There's so many gods, and they're going to continue to discover whatever they can to find parallels and use that against Christianity. But here's what I say. Okay, if you're ever encounter anybody that is bringing this up, I say, number one, understand that the parallels are not really present. They must be forced in a hodgepodge manner. You're just grabbing from all over the place. Oh, look, this guy cuts open a bull and that washes the sins of the people. So that must mean that Christianity borrowed as the blood of Jesus Christ washes the sins of his people. No, it's not even a parallel, it's a bull. And it's a baptism ceremony. Most of the mystery religions, as they are presented, post-date Christianity. And there's a fallacy out there that says, after this, because of this. So let's say, like Tim said, Tim presented that fallacy very well when he said, just because somebody does something beforehand doesn't necessitate a borrowing of something afterwards. Just because people baptized into their religion beforehand doesn't make it illegitimate for Christianity to baptize. It's kind of like saying Aristotle, many years before Christ, believed in God. So Christianity must have borrowed from Aristotle. No, you can't make that parallel. There were many stories, and this is a different argument, a different context, but there were many flood stories before the Noah flood story. Therefore, Noah's flood story borrowed from those earlier ones. No, it's not really an argument until you put forward the evidence. Because if there was a flood, there would be many flood stories, right? So this isn't an argument to say, because this came before it, what came after it copied after it. And most importantly, beyond all else, let's just say, let me back up and say, hey, I'll grant to you everything. I'll grant to you every parallel. I won't even look it up. I won't even examine it. But here's the deal that I've got that's different than you, is that mine is placed in a historical context. Mine is falsifiable. Mine has times, dates, people, events, everything surrounded it, documented, that makes you examine it historically. Yours has nothing. Yours is ambiguous in history, dates, times, places, people. Yours cannot be tested. Therefore, I have much more obligation, right, and integrity whenever I believe Christianity than I do in Osiris or Mithras or Hercules, because they have no historic data, historic evidence that makes a positive argument for their case. If you want to give a positive argument for it, please do so. And anybody, I guarantee anybody who's ever bringing this up to you, whether it's on the internet or in person, will never even have read this stuff. They have no clue. They've never read the stories themselves. It's not as if they were reading through it and discovered it themselves and said, wow, my faith is falling apart because I saw this person cut up into 14 pieces and 13 of the pieces were found and put back together and must be borrowed. Jesus must have borrowed from that. Nobody would ever make such a parallel. It's a forced argument to discredit Christianity in hopes that you have never studied this. But that's what I tell you. Just say, okay, fine. Give me the evidence. Tell me which story of Osiris you're talking about. Let's read it together. Let's see how parallel it is. And let's date it. What's the earliest date you have for this? So you date it and you read it. And there won't be anything that has any contention with Christianity. No. I mean, every one of these, the earliest that we have is 100 to 200 years afterwards, but most of them are about 400 years afterwards, and most of them are very dynamic in their development. So the earlier ones that are 200 years are different than the ones that are 400 years later. So nothing like that, and besides that, there's nothing to falsify it. There's no times, dates, events, people, such as Christianity. Christianity is so unique. You got to understand how incredibly unique it is to place itself in a falsifiable context. I mean, God has just opened himself up and said, hey, come on, test me in every way, because I have given you every single detail that can falsify what I'm saying. Everybody else, it's closed. It's happened in a cave by a prophet who had a secret encounter with an angel, and he wrote one book, and you have to just trust it. It's happened, with Hercules, who is a mythical character that we never have any stories about his true origins or dates or people or anything like that. You just have to trust it. Christianity is the last religion in there that you just have to go at with blind faith. And that's one of the most tragic things that we have been duped into in our world, is thinking that we should think of our faith as a blind faith, that the more defense you have for it, the less faith there is. God went through a lot of stuff, a lot of movements in history to make very large footprints in history and make those footprints examined examinable or open for falsifiability.
Which is why I've been kind of struck with this, even though, and I kind of employed it today, hopefully correctly. But if you have the right relationship with somebody who's an atheist or is really antagonistic, and you consider them friends, that you have enough that you could really mock them in some ways. Like the example that I gave today was that if someone came up to you and said, UCO is the best, the Broncos are the best football team that's ever existed on planet Earth. You know, it's like, okay, hey, you might go to UCO, you might love the Broncos, you might even play on the football team, but you're just wrong, okay? I mean, it's just, there's enough falsifiable information to prove that UCO does not have the all-time best football team. There just is. So if you're sitting down with somebody, you're both watching an OU game, and the guy next to you is like, hey, look, yeah, OU's okay, but the Broncos are really the best ever. You would mock them, right? Like you would say, you're out of your mind. What are you talking about? You have no evidence to prove that. You're delusional. How can you actually live your life this way? Because this is so wrong, right? Which I wouldn't do that to just somebody I met on the street, right? But if it's a friend that we're sitting down watching a football game, I'm going to start mocking them because, number one, I'm so confident in knowing that they're wrong, right? And that itself can be an apologetic. Is sometimes when people start talking and you get all clammy and start backing away as they're talking about Cyrus or all the other people, and where instead you're like, what are you are not using your brain today. Come on, I love you too much as a friend to let you continue talking this way. I need to shut your mouth and we need to actually look at the facts. I mean, that is the confidence that we have on this issue, is to be able to really boldly interact with people in a loving way, but to show them, look, I love you too much to let you continue propagating such nonsense.
A few books out there. Ronald Nash has written probably the most extensive treatment that is for a popular audience on this subject, called The Gospel and the Greeks. Did the New Testament borrow from pagan thought? I actually ordered a bunch of these. I don't think they came in yet, but they should be here tomorrow, so you can pick these up. The Gospel and the Greeks by Ronald Nash. I think if you really wanted to get in deep, this is the best place to go. It is pretty much the authoritative guide on this. Another popular level book is Lee Strobel's The Case for Christ. It has an extensive chapter in there about this that interviews both Mike Licona. Oh, The Case for the Real Jesus. Interviews Mike Licona and a couple other scholars that are one Mithriac scholar who is considered one of the top in the world on Mithriac studies. So that's a good one to get.
And we're thanking Lee Strobel, by the way, because he's part of the reason that we got our resurrection class fully funded. Michael requested a retweet, which we wouldn't do in other generations.
For some reason he did it.
Yeah, he retweeted us.
I asked a lot of people for a retweet, and he was the only one that did it.
So he was kind.
Let me tell you about something, maybe the closest thing that I can find to a parallel. There's a guy, and I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right, but his name is Simon Kimbangu. Simon Kimbangu. He, in 1920s, was an African healer. Lots of people saw him heal. There's lots of evidence for this. There's tons of followers that came from this. As a matter of fact, many of his followers made him out to be a deity because of his healings. It is said that on one occasion, by multiple people, that he rose a little boy from the grave. And so that is Simon Kimbangu. It's the best I've got in my studies. Now, here's the problem with Simon Kimbangu. Okay? Number one is that, yes, they did deify him, but it was part of the culture to believe in multiple deities and that you do deify multiple people. So it wasn't as if they believed he was the one true God the same way we do. Number two, while Kimbangu miraculously may have raised a child from the grave, no one ever claimed that he rose himself from the grave. So it's a big difference. Kimbangu is still dead. Jesus is not. Now, here's probably the most significant thing is Kimbangu was a Christian who did every bit of his miracles, he says, in the name and authority of Jesus Christ. People just manipulated his being because he did so many miracles into making him out to be a god. But that's the best parallel that I have, in saying, is there historic evidence? Are there dates? Are there people to back this up? And what's the surrounding context? That's the best I've got because it's the only one that I know of that is falsifiable. Now, do I believe the Kim Bong-Goose stories? I don't know. I think they're very interesting, and I believe in a supernatural worldview, and I do believe that God performs miracles, and I certainly believe that this could be the case. But he was a Christian, doing it in the name of Jesus. So again, I mean, these parallels need to be looked at a little bit more significant and responsible manner. And I just challenge everybody to do that. I challenge those of you who have been challenged by this. I challenge those of you who are atheists, who are bringing this up and using this against people. Please consider this. Please look at the data. Please actually check your sources. We're done here. Let's open it up for questions.
You had a verse at the end. I thought was good.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, and I have these two things. Let them know. Ask them to give specific. I already talked about that, so that's good. And this is kind of Tim's statement earlier. I mean, we destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God and take every thought captive to obey Christ. And I feel like that this is something that in our apologetics we do and we can destroy arguments that are out there. There will always be the arguments against God. There will sometimes be recycled like this one, and sometimes they'll be brand new, but I do believe that we can always be able to destroy these arguments.